going on, guys? Welcome back to another Swift video. In today's video, we're going to be continuing with our Spotify app. Specifically in this part, we're going to be actually hooking up the ability to tap into one of these albums up here, new releases, as well as the playlist, and render out the tracks and information about that item that we tap on. So if that all sounds good, make sure you start by destroying the like button down below. Let's open up Xcode and let's dive back into our project. So right here on the Spotify API, there are endpoints to both get an album as well as a playlist, and they're pretty simple. So we're going to need to add those API calls in the API caller. And before we even do that, one thing that we want to do is we want to come back to the home view controller, and we want to go back to the configure models function. So we have new albums, playlists, and tracks here as parameters, but we're converting them to view models and we're never actually saving them. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is we are going to add properties to this current controller where we can actually save each of these. So right now I'm just saying self dot whatever the parameter name is, but we're going to actually go ahead and add these up here in a quick moment. So here we're going to say private var is that. It starts off empty. Same thing for this one. I'm going to move them up above in just a moment. I'm just putting them here for the sake of copy and pasting and being slightly lazy about it. So we're going to copy this one as well. Let's go ahead and paste that in right there. And all three will start as an empty array. Let's go ahead and move these guys all the way up here. Looking good. And now the reason that we want to save the original model data into an array itself is once the user taps on one of the cells, we can reference based on the position the actual model. So I don't think we actually implemented did select item at index path. So I'm going to add that function in right here, did select item at index path for the collection view. First, we're going to say collection view deselect the item at the index path. The next thing we're going to go ahead and do is we are going to get the section, which is going to be sections, and get the index path.section out of it. Based on that, we are going to switch on this guy, and there are 3 sections, but we don't care about the entire view model, right? We don't care about the view models at all, actually. So we are going to say if that section is featured playlists, do something. If the section is new releases, we want to do something. And finally, if the section is recommended tracks, we also want to do something. So I'm going to start by sticking a break in each of these just so we don't get any errors. And let's do, which one do I have open here? Let's do albums first, getting an album. So new releases is new albums that are released. So what we first want to do is want to get the album for which we want to query more data against the API. And this is going to be new albums. And we're going to get the nth element at that position. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to want a dedicated view controller to render out information about this album. So I'm going to open up other, and we're going to create a new file in here. It's going to be a Cocoa Touch class, and we are not a Swift file. We want a Cocoa Touch class. We're going to be subclassing a UI view controller, and this guy is going to be an album view controller. Go ahead and create it. Now in this guy, we want to go ahead and start by getting rid of the commented out text. We are going to say this has a title to start off with of album. We are also going to give it a nice background color of system background. And we're going to add a custom initializer on here. And this initializer is going to take in a album. So if this view controller, is responsible for rendering out, things relating to one album, it should own the property for the given album. So I'm going to add a private constant on here, which is called album of type album. We also need to make sure we bring in the required initializer. And I'm also going to say super dot init here, and we want init with a nib name and a bundle, and both of these will be nil, just like that. And before we come in here and do some more stuff, let's go back to our home view controller. And what we can basically do now is we can create that view controller that we just set up. So it's album view controller, and it gets created with an album, just like that. We're going to go ahead and give this a title. So we'll say the VC's title. is going to be the album dot name. And we are also going to say VC navigation item dot large title display mode will be never. And finally, you guessed it, we're just going to push this view controller onto the stack by saying navigation controller push VC animated true. So let me go ahead and hit Command R, and let's make sure we can tap on one of those new release albums at the top, and that another screen, another controller does, show up. So here our simulator is launching. There's our data. We're going to tap on this, and boom, we are in an album. And now we just want to hook that up for playlists as well, and then we're going to hook up those API calls. So one thing that I think I just kind of botched here is in an album view controller, we don't want the title to be this generic album. We want it to be the album.name. So let's go ahead and do that. And let's also go ahead and make a new view controller for a playlist. So I'm going to copy all of this actually, since it's going to be pretty similar to the next controller for the next controller. So we're going to say this is a playlist view controller. Go ahead and it looks like it's yelling at me. Let's see. I guess we have this already, so we don't need to create it. So let me see. Where did I create this? We have a player and we have a playlist view controller. Beautiful. Let's go ahead and paste in the stuff that we need. And instead of this having an album in it, this controller will be responsible for taking in a playlist. Its type is going to be updated to be, once again, a playlist. Playlist right there. Change up all these names like that and like that. And the name here is going to be playlist dot name, just like that. Hit Command V, make sure it's compiling. And let's go back to our home view controller. And in this one here for featured playlists, we can actually go ahead and just copy all of the stuff that we have in the second case. I'm going to go ahead and paste it right there. We're going to change the VC to be a playlist view controller. And we're going to go ahead and change the constructor since it takes in a playlist, just like that. That's a playlist. That's going to be playlists. And we should be good to go. That should be playlist.name. Hit Command B to compile. Let's go ahead and give it a run. And now we should be able to tap on any of the playlists in the second section down here. So if I tap on that, boom, we opened up the evening acoustic playlist. And now we just got to work on those particular view controllers to render out the information. Now, before we can actually render out the information, obviously we need to get the information, and that leads us back into the managers and API caller. And what I'm going to start doing is let's go ahead and start cleaning some of this stuff up. So we have a bunch of API calls here, and it's going to get pretty messy pretty quick. So I'm going to start adding mark statements just to organize, like what each API call is being used for. So this one's for browse, whereas this one is for profile. And let's just go ahead and add albums up here. We're going to say albums, and we are also going to have playlists. And later on, once we, allow the user to save albums and, save and create playlists, we're going to have a bunch of more API calls. So it's good to organize sooner rather than later. So that all said, let's go ahead and create a function on here. This is going to be get album details for album. We're going to pass in a given album, and the completion here is going to be an escaping closure with a result. We don't know what the model is going to be yet, so I'm just going to stick with a string, and this whole thing is going to return void just like that. Beautiful. The first thing we want to do in here is create a request for a given URL. So constants, base URL, adding in the suffix for the path. I believe it's a get, and the completion handler will be a closure. Let me just go ahead and line break all of this jazz so we have a little bit more legible code. This is going to have basically a request that it creates, and here we will, execute the request. So let's come back here and see what it looks like. So this is the URL we need to hit. So it's going to be /albums / the ID of the album that we want to get information about. So we're going to go ahead and add that in here. This is going to be /albums / we can come in here and say album.id. Now this ID is a string in itself, so we can just append it in just like that. And I think that's all we really need. And now in here, we just want to create a task and execute it. So it's going to be a URL session shared. And we want to have a data task with a request and a completion handler. So here is the one we want, the one with a request. And we've got a completion handler here with some data. We don't care about the HTTP response. And then we have an error as well, which we will take a look at. Now inside of here, we're going to once again, like all the other API calls, we're going to unwrap the data. We're going to make sure the error is nil. We're going to go ahead and return if any of those don't hold up. Let's not forget to say task.resume, just like that. And let's see, in this guy, we're going to say completion. Something clearly went wrong. So we're going to say failure, API error dot fill to get data, looking good. And we want to go ahead and try to convert the data into a JSON object. So we're going to say JSON serialization, JSON object for the data. Option is allowing fragments. Let's go ahead and print out that JSON to make sure that we actually got it working. And if a error occurs, we'll go ahead and print out the error, and I'll also go ahead and say failure and bubble up that error to the caller. So cool, I know I went through that pretty fast, but it should be pretty redundant at this point for all of you guys watching. So let's go back into controllers other, and we're gonna jump into the album view controller that we created. And what I'm gonna say is, as soon as viewDidLoad load is called, we're gonna start fetching data. So we're gonna say this is API caller shared, and we're gonna get details for an album. And what is album? Well, it's simply album, since that's a property on this controller. And this is gonna give us a results back. Now, what are we going to do in here? We are going to say dispatch queue main async on the main thread. We are going to do a switch over the results. That is not how you spell results, results. And in the success case, we want to go ahead and get the model and render it out. And in the failure case, we want to go ahead and get the error and let the user know that something went wrong. So let's go ahead and give this a run. I'm going to tap on one of the albums, and we should be able to see some data printing out. Looks like we have an error because I always forget to put try before this decode call. I don't know why I always forget to do that after so many years of this, but let's go ahead and expand our console here. Looks like we have configuring view models as well as start fetching data. We don't really care about those print statements. I'm going to tap on one of these albums. Let's go with, cool, location. Why not? Here is a bunch of information about this album. So let's go ahead and let's start putting this into a response object. So I'm going to jump into my models folder. I'm going to open this up. And let's see, do we have something suitable for this already? I don't think we do. So let's create a new file here. We're going to create this, and it's going to be a album details response, I guess what we can call it. It'll be a Swift file. We're going to say album details response, just like that. Go ahead and create that guy. And let me just copy all of this JSON so we can paste it in here and work with it. So we're going to say struct album details response, codable, just like that. Let's go ahead and paste that in there. Let's see what the keys are. So we have album type. I guess we can grab this. It's going to be a string, and let's lowercase that t. And then we also have in here artist, which looks like it's an array of artist objects. So let's spell that correctly. I like copy and pasting in case I botch it. So there is artist. Let's get rid of that whole thing. And then there is available markets. So this looks like this is an array of strings. So I'm going to put that there. Let's go ahead and delete that whole thing. And let's see, so copyrights, we don't really care about those. I'm gonna get rid of these. External IDs, don't really care about that either. External URLs, I guess we can care about this. We might allow the user to share this song. So let's go ahead and save this because the URL will come in handy since it's a link to the song on Spotify's service. So it's a dictionary, just like that. Looking good. Genre, we don't really care about that either. Href, don't care. ID is pretty important, even though we already have the ID in the other model, the original album that we got. And images, let's get this as well. So images is going to be an array of API image, just like that. get rid of this guy. Label is important. So this is the label that is publishing the music, I guess, the record label. We have a name, popularity, don't care about. All right, there's a name. And the most important piece of this whole thing is tracks. And this one in particular only has one track, but you'll see that is pointing to a dictionary, which is another object. So this is going to be, I believe this is a audio track response or something like that. We called it something like that in another file. I forget what we called it, but that tracks internally has an items. So what I'm going to say is this is a struct. We'll call this a tracks response codable let items. And the items is pointing to an array of these track objects, which makes sense. And this tracks is pointing to this tracks response. I feel like I just said tracks a million times, but hopefully that makes sense and you guys get the point. So that should be the appropriate keys and values that we need to set up our API, rather set up the model. So let's go back to the API caller. And instead of getting JSON out of this directly, what we are going to do is we are going to say JSON decoder. We are going to decode this type of model out of the data. And we are printing it, which is cool. Let me go ahead and call this results. We'll call that result as well. And completion here, we're going to say success. We'll say results. Don't forget to change your escaping closure result success type here. That was a mouthful. And finally, go ahead and give it a run. Hopefully we don't have any errors, and let's make sure we're printing out the response. So we're going to tap on one of these. Let me click on a different one. Let's try this one. And there is our result. So what we're seeing is key not found. And this is a good example of how we would situate with errors. So it's saying decoding context, the string value for, let's see, so tracks, right? Int value is nil, and coding key string is items, int value is nil. Let's see, album int value nil. I'm not sure why it's doing that. Let's see, let's try a different one. Maybe I messed up our model. Figured that was bound to happen sooner rather than later. All right, so none of these are actually working. So that means something is not right here. So let's see, album type, artists, available markets, external ID or URLs, images, label, name, and tracks, which is pointing to items. So let's get rid of tracks and let's see if that's the culprit. You can go through the error one by one. I personally find it faster to just like comment these out and see which one is the culprit. And just like that, you'll notice it's far quicker that we can just see the issue is tracks here. So let me go back to the response. They have an example response in the API. You'll see that tracks is pointing to an object which has an array of items, and each item is supposed to be an actual track. So let's see what's wrong here. So we have items, which is a audio track. This is tracks, which is tracks response. So it's kind of weird. Let's go ahead and comment that items out. I suppose we probably have a mismatch of either a key or a given track. So let's go ahead and give this a run once more. So clearly audio track is the culprit. So let's jump into audio track. I'm going to hit this. We're going to say jump to definition, and we're going to see what the problem is here. So an audio track has an album on it, artists, available markets, duration, ID, popularity. So let's see, let's come into this. And unfortunately, we're going to have to go through it key by key and find out which one we're screwing up. So artist is definitely there. Available markets, explicit ID, href. Looks like popularity isn't there, okay? So that said, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make this int optional. We can actually get rid of popularity, to be honest, since we're not even using it. Let's go ahead and hit Command R one more time to give it a run. One of these is going to be the issue, and we'll find out. So we still have an error here, and we're saying in tracks, int value, let's see, no association with key for coding key, string for album. int value, it's saying the album is nil. So let me go ahead and make that one optional. Let's try that one more time and see what this is yelling about. So this is yelling at us that this audio track, this album, basically we're using it elsewhere. So if we make it optional, we have to make it optional elsewhere as well. So what I kind of want to do is let's go back to the API caller. To get this dialog to search your project files, hit Command-Shift-O. Let me just do undo a few times in here. I kind of want to get that JSON printing out again so I can actually see what's in a given track, because I kind of just assumed. So let me click on this one here and let's see what's in a track. So a track has a bunch of things in it. All right, let's scroll, let's scroll. Apparently there's a million things in here. That's not helpful. Let me click on a different one. I forget which one we clicked on initially that only had one in it. Let's come back and let's try this second one down here. We're gonna tap on that. And it looks like this one's far smaller. So let's see what we've got going on. So where is tracks and items is what we're looking for. So there is items, and this is an individual item. So let me go ahead and paste this down here. And let's see which thing we are missing. I have a hunch it is albums. So I'll paste that there, Control I to indent everything over. And let's see what we've got. So we definitely have artists. So I don't think that is the problem. It looks like it's a pretty standard artist model. So I'm going to get rid of the artist one. We also have available markets, which is an array of strings. So this one looks good to me as well. Let's get rid of that. We have the disk number, explicit, blah, blah, blah. We don't have albums. So there we go. Albums is the culprit, I believe. So what we will do is we will make album an optional. We're going to go ahead and hit Command B. We're going to see there's an error here because here we are using something from the album. So what we're going to say is we're going to say this is album optional. Let's go ahead and line break. I'm not even sure what file this is, but wherever you get an error that you're using something that's now optional, you'll just need to go ahead and fix it. And once you do that, you'll be able to compile again. Let's go ahead and give this a run. And actually back in our API caller, we actually need to change this back to decode the proper types. I'm just going to do Command-Shift-Z for redo. Go ahead and give this a run once more, and now we should be able to see the appropriate response being printed out. So let me go ahead and expand my console down here. I'm going to click on one of these. Let's go with this one, and boom, there's our response. So that's a pretty good example of how you can screw up your API models, your codable models. So if you ever screw it up, don't worry too much. It's fairly straightforward to fix it. Let's quickly hammer out getting playlist details. So we're going to say public func. Let me actually copy it because there's no point in typing this whole thing again. We're going to copy this and put it right there. This one's going to be get playlist details. And we are going to pass in a playlist of type playlist. And let's go ahead and find that API call here. So on the left-hand side, what you're looking for is the playlists API right there. So here's an endpoint to get a list of current user playlists. We'll eventually need that. Get a list of user playlists. Don't care about that. Here's what we want. Nope, create a playlist. We want get a playlist. Here we go, get a playlist. So very similar to the albums endpoint where we pass in playlist and then the playlist ID. So let's go ahead and change the URL here. So this is going to be playlists. And we are going to pass in the playlist .id just like that. And in here, we are at the moment going to comment out the completion. And instead of decoding our album response, we're going to decode a JSON object with the data, allowing fragments. And we're just going to print it out for the time being to make sure what we've got is correct. Let's go ahead and get rid of all these prints in here for the first function we wrote. And finally, to actually see if this works, let's go into our controllers and let's actually call this from the playlist view controller that we went ahead and started writing code in. So at the bottom of view to load here, I'm going to go ahead and say API caller shared get playlist details for our playlist. This is going to have a result, which we're going to use in the next video to actually render out, the playlist UI. We're going to have a success model. We're going to break for now. We're going to have a failure with an error, and we're going to also break for now. And let's go ahead and hit Command R to build and run, ignoring those warnings. Let me go ahead and expand this, and we should see a bunch of JSON as soon as I tap into any of these playlists. Beautiful, which we in fact do. This is incredibly verbose, so this is going to be interesting to create a model out of this. So I'm going to highlight and hit the up arrow so we can start getting the stuff out of here. So I'm just going to copy, I guess. Let me copy all the way down to here. I don't think we need more than that. We're going to try to guess our way through this instead of copy and pasting all of that JSON because it's a little ridiculous. So let's go ahead and open up our models. And we want to create a new model here. And this is going to be a playlist details response, just like the album. Go ahead and create it. This will be a playlist details response. Boom, created. Let's go ahead and add in that struct. So playlist details response. It's going to be codable. Let's go ahead and paste that in down here. What we originally had. I'm going to hit Control I. Looks like it's not letting us hit Control I because I never finished typing out all of these. Let me go ahead and close out these curly braces so it lets us indent all this stuff. I think we need one more curly there. So I'm going to highlight all of this and I'm going to open curly there too. We're going to highlight, Control I, and then it indents everything. Indenting it just makes it far simpler to read. So I would definitely recommend it. So what are we going to get out of here? So the first thing we're going to get is the description. It's probably important if the playlist has a description for us to grab it. We don't care about if it's collaborative or not. We are going to want the external URLs, which will be a dictionary string. Pretty cool. And let's see, followers, and maybe we'll want this later on. I don't really care about it at the moment. Href, don't care. ID, we have it already, but might as well include it here. You'll get a theme, see a theme throughout these API calls that this ID is pretty important, and we use it kind of all over the place to reference different types of objects in the API. That's, of course, intentional and pretty important. So that's that. We just added images. Let me go ahead and add in name. And we already have an owner, so I'm not going to bother with this owner again. Primary color, I don't really know if I care about that. I'm going to ignore that too. Public, I guess, is a Boolean. So we'll go ahead and include that, I guess. Why not? Looks like it's a keyword, so you could put them into quotes like that, or you can specify the coding keys. Let's actually just not include it because it's just going to cause more problems than not. Let's see, snapshot ID, don't care. And tracks is important. So we're going to say tracks is our track response. And this is basically what we use in our last model, where this just has items of audio tracks inside of it. So this should be sufficient for our playlist. I'm going to cross my fingers and go and try to use this in the API caller. We'll open up managers again. And instead of decoding to our JSON directly now, we are going to try to decode to that given type. So we're going to say JSON decoder, decode this type from the data, and don't forget to change the type of the result success. Go ahead and hit Command R to build and run. And let's make sure we get a model at the bottom of our console here. So we'll open this up. You can hit Command K to clear it if you weren't aware. We'll go ahead and click on that. And oh no, we have an issue already. So tracks, let's see, no value associated with coding key for artists. Interesting. So let's see what that's complaining about. If I come back to the API here, let's see what each track is holding. So here is tracks. Let me just highlight it. Each item has a, oh, these are a little different. So there's added at, added by, is local. There is a sub element for track. And this track has a album on it. Interesting. So it looks like these tracks are a little different. So this item, let me go ahead and copy one of these. Will it let me highlight? Maybe not. So let me go ahead and copy one of these and bring it into the code so we can more easily read it. So it looks like there are images on here. I think it stops right about here. Let me go and paste this back into the model we created. So we're going to open up models again. At the bottom here, we're going to say playlist response. I'm going to go ahead and paste this guy in. Let's highlight and say Control I. Hopefully I didn't screw that up. All right, curly looks good. Bottom curly looks good as well. All right, let's see what we've got going on. So this one has a added at URL and added by. I don't care about those. I don't care about if it's local or not, but what's strange is this has a sub key for the track. And the track has a album in it, which I guess makes sense. But let's go see what the heck we put in an audio track. So I'm gonna click into that. Looks like this has a couple different things in here. So let me go back here. You can, if you're on a trackpad, a computer, on a keyboard, I guess on a MacBook, you can swipe between files with 2 fingers forwards and backwards if you were wondering how I was doing that. But let's come back down here. It looks like each of these has artists in it. But what's strange is this is the album that it is a part of. And this album has, so this has albums, it has artists, and then it also has, let's see, available markets, disc number, external href, and it looks like it just has track number, which is 1. So what's strange is we should be getting a list of the tracks in this particular playlist. At least I would think that's what we would get. So let's go back to API caller, and I'm gonna undo this stuff that we added here so we can print out the JSON again, and we're gonna actually go through it like we probably should have in the beginning instead of assuming. So let's go ahead and give this a run once more. And we should see the JSON being printed out. So I'm gonna go ahead and clear the console. Let's select one of these playlists, and let me go ahead and copy that like items and tracks business. So let's go ahead and copy tracks, which has an items in it. But I'm just curious of what the heck these items are. So let's copy items. Let's come back to our playlist response. I'm gonna close this bottom panel, and let's cross our fingers and paste it. Now it's pretty large, so I'm just gonna paste it. And of course I get the spinning beach ball because we're pasting a massive JSON structure. Hopefully this doesn't freeze up my recording. I'll be kind of annoyed if it does. Everybody cross your fingers while it's pasting. Worst case, we can open up Xcode again, or I can get a part of it. But yeah, it looks like Xcode is not going to be capable of copy and pasting today. So we might have to go and open this up again. So I'm going to right click Xcode. We're going to force quit because I really don't want to waste more time on this video. Let's go ahead and open that up again. And bear with Xcode. There it is. All right. Hopefully it doesn't start trying to paste again. So the response here is a little strange. I wish Spotify would have included a reference to what keys to expect. They didn't, which I guess is reasonable because, oh, it looks like the paste actually did work. Look at that. Oh, no, it didn't. Just kidding. We're in the wrong file. So let's go back to our playlist response here. I'm going to go ahead and run this in the simulator again, but we want to make sure we select the right simulator, which is the 12 Pro Max. Go ahead and give it a run. And bear with it. Feel free to forward the video if you want to get to the part where I figure out what the heck the JSON is, or if maybe you figured it out before I did. So don't hesitate to continue along. All right, we're gonna scroll up in here, and I'm just gonna grab one of the tracks. So items is an array, and this is one of the items in here. So let's see what the heck an item is. So that's an item. I'm going to Control I to just fix the indentation. And let's see what the heck we've got going on in here. So first of all, this one makes sense. We don't need a list of available markets that large. So let's just go ahead and I'm going to hold Shift and just get rid of a bunch of these for the sake of this being not as long. Let's also get rid of a bunch of these since these are pretty self-explanatory. And let's see what else is in here. So a track appears to have an added at and added by. Okay, that makes sense. So let's go ahead and get rid of these. We don't really care about it. And let me actually take this and put this whole thing into the audio track file so we can see what our audio track has and what we are kind of missing or not aligning with. This is the most annoying part of Codable. So bear with me. So primary color, we don't have that here, which is fine. But we have a sub track in here, which is kind of strange. But we might need to create a totally different model for this now that I think about it. So this track has an album in it. What else does it have in it? It has an album in it, and then it has artists in it, which I guess is empty array, rather an array of artists. It has available markets, explicit, duration. Interesting. So each of these tracks is slightly different, it appears. So what I am going to do is I guess we can create a different model for this now that I think about it. So let's not reuse that one. So instead of track response and items, we're going to create this, and this is going to be, let's say, playlist tracks response. And this is going to be struct for playlist tracks response. It's going to be codable. And once again, this is going to have items. And this is going to be, I guess, a playlist item, let's just call it, for the sake of simplicity. We're going to say struct playlist item. I'm going to say codable here. And in here, we're going to add in all this information. So first thing that we have is a track. So a track is going to be an object itself. It appears, and let's see, this track has an album in it, and it has some other information in here. So it looks like this track is actually an audio track. I wonder why they nested it. I find it a little strange. So let me go ahead and delete this. So it has an album, it has artists, and it has all this other stuff as well. So let's go ahead and get rid of that. Let's see if this is just a audio track. So let me go ahead and make this. Let's get rid of this stuff. And let's go ahead and make this an audio track just like that. And let me hit Command B to compile. All of this should be working. Let's go back to our API caller. And let's see where we made all those changes. It's right here under playlists. We are going to say result is going to be JSON decoder. We're going to decode this model from the data, and we're going to print it out. So everybody cross your fingers because I really don't want to have to deal with this again. And give it a run, and we are going to tap on one of these, and boom, we get it out. Okay, very interesting. Looks like they've nested the track one level down, which is kind of strange, but whatever. I didn't make the API, so can't complain. We need to uncomment out this completion. And what I'm going to do is this response is now going to be the response that we pass in the closure success type for this signature for get playlist details. And let's see, we got rid of the print there. We can get rid of that print as well. And I think that's where we'll cut this video. We can now basically go into the respective controllers for a playlist as well as an album. Now, of course, we're not actually rendering out any UI yet. Maybe we'll do playlists in the next one. You might be wondering about these tracks down here. Basically, when we tap on one of these, we don't actually want to show like, a detail screen. We want to actually play this song. So we're going to hook this up once we start hooking up the player view controller with the controls for audio, rather volume and stuff. So that's all I've got for this one. I apologize, all these videos are super long in this series, but hopefully this helps out someone out there. So if you haven't liked the video yet, definitely do that. It helps out immensely. Comment any questions, feedback, errors, concerns, and definitely subscribe if you haven't done that yet. We can grow the channel together. I've got high hopes for this channel and community in general. So thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.